Chapter 6. The hero becomes a villain. After learning of this threat of attack, I stayed away from the coast so that the Blefuscudians wouldn't see me. They didn't know of my existence, for all communication and trade between the two kingdoms had been forbidden. I started making plans to capture the Blefuscudian fleet, and sent for the Emperor's scouts to get the information I needed. "Where is this new large fleet right now?" I asked them. "At anchor in the harbor across the channel, Man Mountain," one scout replied. "They should set sail with the next good wind." "And how deep is this channel?" "When it's high tide the water is 70 glumgluffs deep in the middle," a seaman replied, "but the rest is only 50." I did some quick arithmetic and figured that the deepest part of the channel was only 6 feet deep, and the rest a little over 4 feet. Next, I hurried to the northeast coast and lay down behind a hill to stay out of sight as much as possible. I took out my telescope to view the fleet and counted 50 warships and many transports. Returning home, I gave orders to have long lengths of heavy cable and iron bars brought to me. I twisted 3 lengths of cable together to make them thicker and stronger, then tied the cable to the iron bars, which I wrapped in packs of 3, bending one end into a hook. Armed with 50 hooked cables, I returned to the coast an hour before high tide came in. I left my jacket, shoes, and stockings on the shore and waded across until the water got too deep. Then I swam until my feet could touch bottom once again. This took less than a half an hour. The enemy were so terrified when they saw me wade towards their fleet that 30,000 sailors jumped off their warships and swam to shore. I immediately began hooking my cables onto the prows of the ships and tied the loose ends together in my hand. As I worked, my hands and face were attacked by thousands of arrows. Fearing severe damage to my eyes, I put on my glasses to protect myself. Once all my cables were hooked on, I used my knife to cut their anchors. Then I easily pulled the 50 warships behind me across the channel. Cries of grief and despair from the Blefuscudians reached my ears, but I was too busy towing their ships and pulling their arrows out of my hands and face to be troubled about them. The Emperor and his whole court were standing on shore as I made my way across the channel. From where they stood, they could make out the 50 ships that fanned out in a semicircle behind me, but they couldn't see me because I was walking in deep water up to my nose. "Our Man Mountain has drowned!" cried the Emperor, "and enemy ships are coming to attack us!" Within minutes, though, the channel became shallower and I walked out of the water, holding up the cables for all the Lilliputians to see. I called out in a loud voice, "Long live the most powerful Emperor of Lilliput!" How His Majesty praised me when I reached the shore. He even made me a Nardak, which is the highest title of honor awarded in the kingdom. But his next request disturbed me. "Man Mountain, I wish you to bring the rest of the Blefuscudian ships to Lilliput. I wish to rule that land and destroy all the big Indians who fled there. Then I'll force the rest of the people to break open their eggs at the small end." "But, your Majesty, that seems a very harsh punishment," I protested. "I helped you by bringing their warships here, but I could never help you kill the big Indians or make slaves of the rest of the Blefuscudians." The Emperor glared at me, then stormed away in anger. I knew then that he would never forgive me for refusing to help him carry out these unreasonable schemes. While many of his council agreed with me, there were 2 frightened to oppose him. Others in the council, for reasons I would never know, had chosen to become my enemy, and they took advantage of the situation. From that time on, these enemies spoke badly of me to the Emperor, who was eager to listen to them and eager to help them plot my destruction. "How quickly His Majesty forgets the many services I did for him," I reminded myself. "How greedy he is for power!" About 3 weeks after I captured the Blefuscudian warships, 6 ambassadors and a train of 500 people arrived from that island to ask for peace. Our Emperor agreed to a treaty that would naturally benefit him and Lilliput. Since I was still officially welcome at court, I was among the officials invited to greet the ambassadors. It seems that someone had secretly told them how I had spoken on their behalf to prevent the Emperor from attacking and enslaving their people. The head ambassador praised me in his greeting. We know how brave and strong you are, Man Mountain. So, our Emperor has asked me to invite you to visit Blefuscu. I'd be delighted to do so before I return to my country, I replied, for I've heard many praises about your Emperor and the way he rules his kingdom. Afterwards, I went to the Emperor of Lilliput to ask permission to visit Blefuscu. While he agreed to let me go, he did it in a rather cold and resentful manner. I couldn't understand this at first, but I soon learned that Flimnap and Bolgolam had convinced the Emperor that I had been using my conversations with the Blefuscudian ambassadors to complain about Lilliput. However, it wasn't long after this that I had the opportunity to do what I thought was a great service to His Majesty. It happened late one night, when I was awakened by 100 people banging at my door and shouting to me, "Hurry, Man Mountain, hurry! You must come to the palace immediately!" Several members of the court made their way through the crowd and shouted, "We need your help! The Empress's apartment's on fire! We have ladders against the walls and we're throwing buckets of water into the fire, but we can't put it out." I knew that their buckets were equal in size to a thimble, and that a large burst of water was needed to put out a fire in such a large palace, so I ordered the crowd, "Leave at once, and don't block the path from here to the sea and from the sea to the palace." I immediately hurried to the sea and filled every inch of my mouth with water. Then I rushed to the palace and spit out the mouthful with such force that within 3 minutes the fire was completely extinguished. I was delighted to have saved that wonderful building from destruction. I returned to my house without waiting for thanks from the Emperor. I was concerned, however, that he might be upset at the way I had put out the fire, since the laws of Lilliput made it a crime to spit anywhere near the palace. I later learned that, although the Emperor agreed to pardon me, the Empress was so enraged at what I had done that she moved to another building in the palace and swore that she would never return to the apartment I had spit on. So, within a few weeks, my spitting had changed me from a hero to a villain.